Hey Year 11, I thought I would make this into a quick video because many of you missed my feedback session last week on our multimodal essays. So here's just a quick rundown of what we went through during that lesson, just to give you a bit of an overview on what I was looking for, what worked and what didn't work in the last assessment. I just want to start with this idea that every single one of you produced an amazing multimodal essay as standalone pieces of work. I literally had to keep remind myself that 16-year-olds were creating these. They were incredible. They were impressive, they were insightful, and they were complex and multi-layered. So amazing job, guys. Every one of you did that. I was really proud of you. But the clincher for that is it's an assessment, and unfortunately I had to mark to a criteria, which is our marking rubric. Now, if I didn't have to do that, I would have loved to have rewarded you all with incredible results because, like I said, they took time. There was so much effort put into them, and they revealed, a really deep understanding of what we taught you this term. But the criteria does box us in. That's why we give it to you. That's what we have to mark on, and that just takes away the grey area of, subjectivity in terms of marking. So this tells you exactly what you need to do, and us as teachers, when we're marking it, it keeps it much more on a equal playing field. So just to go over what the better responses had in them, one of the biggest things was the choice of related text. Using a text that is substantial and deeply linked to the key concerns of the unit, rather than just trying to find a specific aspect of your prescribed text that could connect. So it's more like that conceptual linking rather than a text-based linking. That made a huge difference. I also found that some of you chose some works from the canon, which basically means they're quality pieces of literature. And it made it a lot easier for you to write about it with a sophistication and a real depth, because, as you've probably heard English teachers say in the past, don't ever choose Disney or Pixar or kids movies. They do have their positives, but they are quite difficult to be able to create meaningful analysis with. And I did see that. Some of you guys chose amazing texts like the Bible and Metamorphosis, Jekyll and Hyde, Planet of the Apes, some incredible contemporary songs that had so much meaning in them. And that made a huge difference in terms of what you were able to produce. The other one was some of you had difficulty reframing ideas that connected to the prescribed text rather than the concept. So what I mean is just bringing back from what I just said, these related texts, the better responses linked through concept rather than through a good, clear connection between either Life of Pi, Animal Farm, or Quiet on the Western Front, or Forrest Gump. They connected more to the allegorical storytelling or the rebellion narrative. The good ones had a really clear balance of conceptual ideas and evidence, and judicious evidence at that. So that means, the analysis that you provided, the quotes and evidence that you provided were linked with qualities to what you were just saying. They actually substantiated your ideas rather than just like a little addition, because that's the quote that you sort of understood. This was an analytical essay and not so much a discursive piece. So even though we encouraged you to play around with structure and formatting, it still needed to have the elements of analysis and academic voice. In saying that as well, so the better ones had a really clear, sustained thesis. Well, a thesis that was set up really clearly in the beginning. And then I could see it clearly signposted throughout the rest of the essay, whether that be in your topic sentences, your linking sentences, within your analysis. I kept being reminded of what your conceptual argument was, and that was clear. This was a big one. The digital elements value added and supported, not just added description. So what I mean by that was I still rewarded people who added links and hyperlinks and buttons and pictures and moving images, etc. That was great. That was what multimodal is. But the ones that actually do really push that marking criteria were those ones that added depth to the argument. So, for example, there was an essay that discussed psychoanalytic theory with Sigmund Freud, and there was a hyperlink to an article about that, and it was clearly linked to the argument that was in the essay. So that added depth. It added another layer of meaning to what was being discussed in the essay, rather than just another description of the film or like study notes or a study guide of the related text or the novel or the film that you're looking at. So like I said, I didn't take marks off at all for Spark Notes or those sorts of things, but the ones who marked really well were the ones whose article added another layer of depth. And lastly, which we look at all the time, is use of vocabulary and terminology. They were quite different across the essays, as you can imagine, the allegory versus the rebellion narrative. But it was the better responses used them well and used them consistently, and as well as the academic voice that we were looking for. Okay, so looking at the rubric in detail, the first one states original ideas, insightful, specific, divergent thinking, well-developed conclusions, willingness to take intellectual risk in discussion. Okay, this one was really important. Original thinking, an ability to draw those conclusions to the points you were making. And I liked it when I saw you guys move beyond what was just discussed in the classroom. So from Mrs. Kelly or myself, you were pushing your thinking. I could see that you had taken time to do some extra research, and that was reflected in your argument. Now, critical thinking and intellectual risk in your writing, that means you are pushing your vocabulary, you're pushing your understanding, you're exploring ideas that are quite conceptual and abstract, but in a way that I could still see your personal voice. But in saying that, I also was looking for clarity. So yes, you were taking a risk, but it was still clear. I could still understand what you were saying, and it was concise and sustained throughout. So that was the ideas section of the rubric. The next one was the actual multimodal. In specifics, it was the skillful integration of a variety, intentional and sustained use of engaging digital elements. And that meant that, like I said before, the elements you put in there added depth to your ideas, but also I was looking for a good variety. So some of you might have had incredible hyperlinks, but that was all you used. Or some of you had really cool moving images that was backing up the scene that you were analyzing, but that was it. Okay, so I was rewarding if I saw multiple elements of the digital. I thought that was quite important. Deliberate formatting, reflecting our ideas. Now, this was a really interesting one, and I can remember clearly the student who did Jekyll and Hyde, and it was such a good choice because I could see deliberate formatting choices reflecting that that oppositional idea, conceptual idea in the formatting, not just in the argument, so that the light and the dark, the black and the white, that was all the way through the deliberate choices in that multimodal aspect of the essay. And it was so powerful. It really, really reflected what was being said in the words. And the multimodal also needed to have allow for flow and engagement. As I was watching, it just worked. Okay, so that, and made me interested to see what was coming up next. So that was the multimodal. Stylistic devices also came in there in terms of the multimodal aspect, but it also was the way you paragraphed, etc. So extensive and sustained use of powerful and precise stylistic and language devices for an academic essay. So that's your academic vocabulary, your concept terminology. Now, this one for here was a real discriminator. It was clear and not convoluted and overdone. So you might have been using academic vocab and terminology, but if it was overdone and it took away from the meaning, that actually decreased the sophistication. So I think sometimes we get caught up in trying to put in too many amazing words when really we could just say it a lot more simply so that it is still concise and understandable. Stylistically as well, that also looked at color, line, shapes, etc. on the page to allow for ease of reading. Next is the structure overall. Essay flows effortlessly, artfully, seamless integration of ideas and elements. Clearly and aesthetically presents a response that's a pleasure to read. Paragraphing and form effectively separate and develop your thinking. Sequencing skillfully contributes to purpose, and reader is effectively carried through the piece. What I mean by this, what I was looking for, so the real high responses, your structural choices in your writing mirrored your concepts. There was another student who really took a risk in the way that the multimodal essay was presented, and it really paid off. It just presented those ideas very clearly, very concisely, and it really made that pleasure to read marker hit the nail on the head on that one. Transitions, a lot of you struggled with your transitions. So even though it was quite chunked in a lot of the multimodal essays, which is what we wanted, I still needed to see that there were connections throughout your ideas. It's still an essay. So that could be as simple as a lack of transition words between ideas. Clear, aided in sustained quality. Okay, can't forget that one. And impactful links maintained throughout. That kind of goes back to your thesis and the signposting. But you are constantly referencing back why you are writing this essay. That's what I was looking for. And finally, the crafting for audience purpose and context. Quite a tricky one to get the 5 out of 5 because, again, it's a polished piece. I needed to see that you had really put your time in to do your drafting, multiple revisions, an evolution of thought, sophisticated and clearly defined topics, a clear presentation, language for precision, purpose, audience, context, and very little errors. Okay, that was hard. No errors in punctuation, grammar and typos. Really tricky one. A few of you have already asked me about that, and that's completely fine. But I think you will be surprised when you really do sit down and slowly go through your work. There's still a lot of work to be done on that area. I highly suggest going forward that you invest not money but time into a lot of those online tools that can really pick up errors that we miss. And what I mean by we is anyone that you get to look at your work, as in your peers or your parents. Remember, it's not your teacher's job to find all these errors. That's not what we're there to do. So tricky one to get into in the number 5. That also meant the no overlapping. All your links worked. The moving images were moving, and it was all running smoothly on your page. And after talking to Mrs. Kelly as well, that you really did use your time wisely, solid work during conference week. You weren't wasting time, and you were really focused on getting that piece of work polished. All right, I know a lot of you like to see what it looks like overall in terms of the marks and how they sit. What I really want to focus on is that you need to really reflect on yourself. You got to stop looking at everyone else's marks, stop looking at everyone else's ranks, because especially now in year 11, that's not what this is about. You need to look at you as a learner, what you're doing, where your areas are that you need to improve, so that in your next assessment, you're going to smash those elements. That's really, really important. Now, I put this here. Complaints department closed. Now, I really want to reiterate that assessment time, feedback time, drafting time is not about complaints. It's not about why didn't I get this mark. It's not about why did somebody else get that mark. It's not the right way to approach it. We've spoken about this before. I'm not going to harp on too much about it, but I really, really want to push that assessment, especially in year 11, is about getting things right and improving. It's not about complaining and not looking inwards. It's really easy to deflect when you're looking at things that you need to improve. I do it too. It's like, I could have worked a bit harder here, or maybe I shouldn't have left it to the morning of to do my recording. It's easy to deflect onto someone else rather than doing that. So let's move on though, because I don't want to harp on that, because I'd rather our reflection and feedback to be really positive. Mrs. Kelly and myself, all the English teachers, we love this. We are always open to positive reflection, feedback, and specific questions. So I just want to leave on a little thing that I am working on. If you have any questions, please, there is a bit of a process we want you to go through. I want you to value our time as teachers as much as we value yours. So if there's any questions, please email us. And if it's a question that we can answer in that email, we will do so. If it's not, we'll book a time to come and talk to you about it, because trying to get a teacher when they're on another class or in their break time or their prep time, it's actually not valuing anyone's time at all, and it's not working. So let's move forward from that. Let's work on being positive and open, with being learners full of growth, so that for our next assessment, which is your examination for Shakespeare, you're going to be ready to smash that. I wanted to finish by just going back to where we started, which was, forgetting all this, forgetting all the marking rubric, etc. You guys, every one of you wrote some amazing stuff. You should be so proud of yourselves. You're in such a good position at this stage of year 11 to head into year 12 with some amazing skills that mean you're going to smash it. We're not kidding when we say we're so impressed with you guys. Keep it up. You're amazing. Let's look towards the next assessment so we can get that right, because it's quite different to this one. Thanks, guys.